He was only a month old, a golden retriever puppy, cream-colored, barely the size of a loaf of bread, and someone had already decided he didn't matter. They tied him to a tree in the middle of a snowstorm. No food, no shelter, just a thin rope cutting into his tiny neck, holding him upright like a forgotten ornament in the freezing woods. He didn't cry, he didn't bark, he just waited, because waiting was all he'd ever known. Snow fell. Night came. No one came for him. Until a man who had already lost everything heard the silence. What you're about to witness is a story of heartbreak and healing, of a bond stitched together by frostbitten hope. It's not just about rescue, it's about redemption. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe no creature should ever be left out in the cold, hit that subscribe button. This story begins in the snow, and it ends somewhere warmer. The wind moved like a whisper through the trees that morning, soft but cold enough to bite through the wool of an old man's coat. Claremont, North Carolina, usually quiet in December, had been hit with an early snowstorm that coated the sleepy hills and pine woods in thick white silence. The roads were still passable, but barely. Tree branches hung heavy, brittle with ice, and just beyond the edge of Porter's Bluff Road, where the forest opened into an old footpath carved by deer and thyme, Jack Porter moved with careful steps, a bundle of firewood pressed to his chest, and the smell of smoke still clinging to his jacket. Jack, 70 years old, had the frame of someone who'd once been strong in the way soldiers are, straight-backed and broad-shouldered, but softened by time. His gray hair was always combed back, face clean-shaven even though no one came by to see him. His hands, still rough from woodworking, showed the tremor of age, but not weakness. Since retiring from the Army, Jack had lived quietly with his wife, Martha, in a modest wooden house tucked into the woods. They had lost their only son, Timmy, 20 years ago in an accident that the sheriff called a tragic case of wrong place, wrong time. Jack never argued with that. He just stopped talking about it. That was his way, quiet, dutiful, kind, and almost completely unreadable. But this morning, as he stepped over a drift of snow and heard it, the sound that didn't belong, his heart paused. It wasn't much of a sound, not a bark, not even a whimper. It was more like a cough choked through frost. Jack stopped moving. He tilted his head and listened. Nothing. Then again, just barely, a strangled squeak, the sound of something very small trying not to be forgotten. He dropped the firewood. It didn't take long to find it. The snow near the base of a gnarled oak tree had been disturbed, flattened as if something had struggled, and at the center of it all was a tiny, half-buried form. Jack knelt, brushing the snow aside with stiff fingers. At first he thought it was dead, but then it shuddered, and the breath that escaped from the creature's mouth came out in a wheeze. It was a puppy. Barely a month old, Jack could tell by its size and the softness of its cream-colored fur. A golden retriever, or something close. But the fur was soaked, matted with mud and clinging bits of leaf and pine. A frayed rope was wrapped around its neck, tied tight enough to leave marks, anchoring it to a root like an afterthought. The puppy's eyes were closed, and its ribs shifted beneath its skin with each shallow breath. "God Almighty," Jack muttered. He didn't think. He untied the rope with fingers that moved slower than they used to, pulled the puppy gently into his coat, and wrapped it close to his chest. The pup was cold, limp, too light. Jack turned back toward the house without a word. The hike back wasn't long, but it felt eternal. Snow crunched beneath his boots. His breath clouded the air in bursts. The wind pressed against his face, and he leaned into it, shielding the little body inside his coat like it was something precious, because it was. Because it had survived something it wasn't meant to. Martha Porter was standing in the kitchen when he burst in. 65 and smaller than Jack by almost a head, Martha still moved with the gentle grace of a former teacher. Her silver hair fell around her shoulders loose, a habit she'd picked up after retirement, and her warm hazel eyes flicked to Jack's face as he slammed the door. "What happened?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Jack didn't answer. He moved straight to the fireplace and knelt, peeling open his coat. Martha gasped. "Oh, my lord, Jack!" The puppy made a weak noise, a breath more than a sound, as Jack laid it carefully on an old woolen towel by the fire. He'd used that towel once for Timmy's first dog, Max. The memory scraped across his chest like old glass. Martha was beside him in a flash, already wrapping another blanket around the small form, her hands steady, voice soft. "Where did you find him?" "Tree line," Jack said. "Tied up." "He's freezing." She touched the pup's nose, then gently its belly. "Cold to the core. He won't last unless we warm him now." Jack added wood to the fire. Martha ran for warm water, a heating pad, and sugar water in a dropper. They worked in silence, both instinctively in sync like they hadn't been in years. It wasn't until the puppy let out a weak groan that Jack realized he was holding his breath. And it wasn't until he looked up and saw Martha's eyes, wide, glistening, that he understood he was shaking. Not from the cold. "Jack," she whispered, "are you all right?" He didn't answer, but she knew. Because the last time Jack had run like that through the snow, breath ragged, arms full of something fragile, it had been Timmy. And that time, he'd been too late. But not this time. Not this time. They worked through the morning. The puppy remained unconscious but breathing. Martha warmed cloths and whispered soft encouragements. Jack sat on the floor near the hearth, his back against the brick, watching every tiny rise and fall of the pup's chest. They hadn't given him a name yet. They didn't dare, not until they were sure. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time in years, something stirred in the air between them that wasn't just shared grief. It was hope. The first full day with the puppy unfolded like a page from a book they hadn't read in years. The kind where every sound mattered, every moment held its breath. Morning sunlight pooled on the wooden floor, pale and cold, but the house was warm with fire and motion. Jack had been up since before dawn, checking the coals, boiling water, watching for any change in the bundle that now had its own space beside the hearth. Martha moved about the kitchen in slippers, her soft gray hair unpinned and falling naturally past her shoulders. She wore an old sweater of Timmy's, oversized and faded, the sleeves pulled up at the wrists. She didn't mention it, and Jack didn't ask. But he noticed. She moved like someone who had fallen into an old rhythm, measuring spoonfuls of broth, warming rags over the stove, folding towels into neat corners before lining the dog bed with them. There was no hesitation in her care, only quiet intent. Scout, as they had named him the night before, had stirred twice in the early hours. The first time, to lift his head weakly toward Jack's hand. The second, to cough. A small, brittle sound that echoed in the wooden cabin like glass cracking underfoot. They fed him sugar water every 2 hours, a dropper at a time. Jack had crafted a hot water wrap using a canteen and wrapped it in flannel, laying it beside the puppy's shivering frame. Martha dabbed his paws gently with a warm cloth. The ice had crusted between his toes. She wiped until they were pink again. By mid-morning, Scout was still too weak to stand. He blinked now and then, but his eyes never fully focused. His breathing remained shallow, uneven. Jack sat beside him for long stretches of time, one hand resting on the floor, palm up near the puppy's reach. Sometimes Scout's paw twitched toward it, sometimes not. It was around noon that Jack spoke, voice low, gaze fixed on the flickering fire. "Timmy had hands like yours," he said. "Long fingers, always warm, even in winter." Martha was kneeling by the couch, replacing the towels with a fresh layer. She paused, not looking up. "He used to sit like this, remember?" Jack continued. "Cross-legged, blanket wrapped around him, with Max curled in his lap. That first winter." Martha nodded once, still not looking. "He called Max his shadow," she murmured. "Said he never needed a nightlight again." Jack smiled faintly. Max followed him everywhere, even waited by the bathroom door. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of that winter so long ago hanging in the air with the scent of pine and damp cloth. Scout let out a small noise, a breathy whimper, and they both leaned in. Martha dipped the cloth again, wiped his ears gently. "You think he'll make it?" Jack didn't answer right away. Then, "He's fighting." The afternoon passed in soft gestures. Jack refilled the firewood rack, checked the cabin for drafts. Martha spooned broth into a saucer, set it near Scout's nose. The pup sniffed once, licked once, then turned his head away. Outside, the wind carried flurries down the slope. The windows frosted from the corners inward. As evening settled, Scout grew quieter. His body no longer twitched, his ears lay flat. His breathing became more labored, rattling now with each inhale. Jack noticed it first. He crouched down, laid his palm on Scout's side. The little chest rose in jerks. "He's getting worse," Jack said. Martha came to kneel beside him. She touched the puppy's nose. It was dry. Too dry. His eyes remained closed. Even when she called his name, her hands trembled. "Jack," she said softly. He nodded. "We can't wait." She stood, already gathering the flannel, the blanket, the small carrier they hadn't used in years. Jack moved faster than she'd seen in a long time, fetching the keys, clearing snow off the truck windshield. Martha cradled Scout in both hands, holding him close to her chest as they stepped into the cold night. The stars had just begun to pierce through the cloud line above. Snow fell like dust, silent and persistent. The old Ford truck roared to life, headlights cutting through darkness. Jack didn't speak as he drove. Martha held Scout like something too fragile to name. The vet clinic sat at the end of a narrow gravel road, its windows glowing with soft yellow light, the only warmth in the snow-covered fields that surrounded it. Dr. Elaine Harper's sign, simple wooden lettering faded from sun and time, swayed slightly in the wind as Jack pulled the truck into the lot. Martha stepped out first, Scout bundled tightly in her arms, wrapped in the same flannel they'd used since the first night. The puppy hadn't made a sound the entire ride. Dr. Harper met them at the door before Jack could even knock. Tall and lean, with short silver-streaked hair and a lined face that looked perpetually focused, she wore a denim jacket over her scrubs and fleece, the sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her eyes, sharp behind thin-framed glasses, immediately fell on the bundle in Martha's arms. "Bring him straight in," she said, stepping aside. The clinic smelled like cedar shavings and antiseptic. Inside, a wood stove hummed faintly in the corner, filling the space with warmth. Scout didn't stir as Martha placed him gently on a padded table. Dr. Harper moved quickly, thermometer, stethoscope, light check into the eyes. Jack stood to the side, arms folded, jaw tight. "His temperature's low," Harper said, her voice calm but clipped. "Still hypothermic. Breathing shallow. He's dehydrated. When did he last eat?" Martha answered softly. "He licked some broth yesterday morning. Nothing since." Harper nodded, already reaching for an IV kit. "I'm going to start fluids. You're lucky you brought him now. 6 more hours and he might not have made it." She worked with practiced efficiency, slipping a small needle into Scout's foreleg with surprising gentleness. Martha hovered nearby, watching with wide, anxious eyes. Jack remained silent, though his fingers drummed against the counter. After a long few minutes, Dr. Harper set the line in place, taped it, and stood up. "That'll help stabilize him, but I want to check something else. He's young, but if someone dumped him tied up like that, I'd like to know who." She walked to a small cabinet, retrieved a handheld microchip scanner, and ran it slowly over Scout's neck and shoulders. A soft beep broke the silence. "He's chipped," she said. "That's something." Jack's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means he had a home, a registered one. Let's see." Harper turned to her computer, typing quickly. The room was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the soft click of her keys. After a moment, her voice returned, lower this time. "Registered to Anna Callahan, Claremont address, dated 3 weeks ago." Martha exchanged a glance with Jack. The name lingered in the air like smoke. Jack's shoulders tensed. "Anna," he repeated. "Anna Callahan." "You know her?" Harper asked, glancing up. Jack's voice was slower now. "She knew my son, Timmy." Harper didn't press, but her eyes stayed on Jack longer than necessary. "She's local. I've treated a few of her fosters before. Quiet woman. Teaches art at the community center now." Jack exhaled through his nose. "I thought she left town." Harper shrugged. "Guess not. You want me to call her, or you want to?" Martha spoke first. "We'll go see her." "Tomorrow," Jack added. "Not tonight." Harper nodded, respecting the tone. "He can stay here overnight. We'll keep him on fluids and heat. If he stabilizes by morning, he can go home." Martha looked down at Scout, who now slept under a warm blanket with a small heating pad beside him. His breathing, though shallow, had evened out slightly. She reached over and gently touched his head. "I'll come by first thing," she said. Jack helped her into the truck without speaking. The snow had picked up again, swirling in soft waves under the moonlight. As they pulled out of the lot, Martha broke the silence. "You think she knew?" Jack didn't look at her. "That Scout was taken?" Maybe, but she didn't report it. She might have been scared, Martha said, or ashamed. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. She was Timmy's first love. She wasn't the reason, Jack. I know. The road home was long and quiet. At the cabin, Jack stoked the fire while Martha filled a thermos with hot tea. They sat together on the couch, the photo of Timmy still on the mantel, watching the flames. "You're going to see her tomorrow?" Martha asked. Jack nodded slowly. "I need to know if she knew, and I need to know who the hell would do that to a puppy." Jack stood at the base of the porch steps, hat in hand, boots heavy with road dust and melting snow. The house in front of him was a small, weathered bungalow tucked behind a veil of bare maple trees. The paint had long since faded to a washed gray, and the garden out front lay dormant beneath a soft blanket of winter frost. A ceramic wind chime, cracked along one edge, clicked faintly against the eaves in the breeze. He hadn't seen Anna Callahan in nearly 20 years. She opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window, unsure whether to answer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jack stared at her with the quiet intensity of someone trying to reconcile memory with reality. Anna was older than the girl he remembered, of course, but not unrecognizably so. Her face was thinner now, cheekbones more pronounced, skin pale with the kind of exhaustion that doesn't sleep off. Her long, dark brown hair was tied low at the nape of her neck, a few wisps escaping to frame her sharp jaw. She wore a cream sweater fraying slightly at the sleeves, and her gray-blue eyes were rimmed with red. "Jack," she said quietly, her voice scratchy with hesitation. He tipped his head. "Anna?" A pause, then, "Do you want to come in?" The living room was sparse, clean but not decorated. A couch with a throw blanket folded neatly at one end, a bookshelf holding more dust than books, and a single framed photo on the wall. An older golden retriever with a boy no more than 6, smiling. Anna followed his gaze but didn't explain. She moved to the small kitchen and poured tea without asking if he wanted any. Jack remained standing, hands loosely clasped in front of him. "I came to talk about the dog," he said. "I figured." She set a mug down on the coffee table and sat on the edge of the couch, hands between her knees. She didn't look up. "We call him Scout," Jack continued. That made her flinch, just a twitch in the corner of her mouth. "That's fitting." "Was he yours?" She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "He was given to me by a local rescue group. I'd just finished a class at the community center. They said he needed someone calm, steady, someone alone." A bitter smile. "Guess I fit the bill." Jack said nothing. He let her speak in her own time. "I kept him for 3 weeks," she went on, voice brittle. "He used to curl up in my coat every night and follow me to the corner store. He was quiet, like he knew I didn't want too much noise." Jack finally lowered himself into the armchair across from her. "What happened?" She rubbed her hands together, fingers trembling slightly. "Cameron happened." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Cameron Wells?" She nodded. "He found out I had the dog. Showed up one night, drunk. Said I was replacing him. That he couldn't stand the idea of me loving something else. We fought. I told him to leave. The next morning, Scout was gone." Jack's jaw tensed. "You didn't go to the police." Anna's eyes finally lifted to meet his. "No," she said. "I didn't." "Why?" She exhaled slowly. "Because it's Cameron. Because he knows how to disappear. Because he's threatened me before, and no one's done anything. I figured if I went to the police and they didn't help, and he found out, I'd lose more than just a puppy." Jack looked down at his hands, worn and scarred. "You should have said something." "I know," she whispered. There was a silence between them, filled only by the ticking of a wall clock and the slow groan of the heater. Jack leaned forward. "You were close with Timmy." Her face crumpled slightly at the name. "He was the only one who ever made me feel safe. I didn't deserve him." "That's not true," she laughed under her breath. "Maybe not. But after he died, I disappeared from that world, from everyone who knew him. And now, Scout," her voice caught. "I thought he was dead." Jack stood. "He almost was." Anna's mouth opened, then closed. "Can I see him?" Jack nodded. "He's at the clinic, getting stronger. I'd like to visit him, just once." "Maybe," Jack said, softer now. "He remembers things. People. Sounds." She swallowed. I hope he doesn't remember me scared. At the door, Jack paused before stepping out. The wind had picked up again, blowing snow across the porch. "You're not the only one who lost something," he said. Anna nodded, eyes shimmering. "I know." The wind had quieted overnight, but the frost on the windows remained like lace etched by a ghost. Jack stood on the front porch that morning, thermos of black coffee in hand, watching the breath rise from his lips in slow clouds. Scout was home again, curled near the fire inside, wrapped in Martha's handmade quilt, a small bell gently attached to his collar to alert them of movement. He hadn't barked once, not since the night they found him, but he did flinch, often, at sounds that didn't seem loud to Jack or Martha. The creak of the pantry door, the snap of the wood stove, even the crinkle of aluminum foil. The worst was the metal door to the garage. When it slammed, even lightly, Scout would scramble beneath the kitchen table, trembling and whimpering until coaxed out. It had happened twice. Martha had watched both times, silent and pale. That morning, Jack made a call he hadn't planned to. Not to the clinic, not to Anna, but to an old friend who had once stood beside him on frozen ground far from home, both of them younger, louder, harder to shake. The phone rang once, twice, then boom. Jack smiled faintly. "Still answering like you're on duty?" The voice on the other end chuckled low. "Only way I know how. That you, Jack?" "Yeah. Hell, been a while. Too long. You need something?" "I do." Harold Boone was 72, broad-shouldered, built like an aging grizzly in flannel. His white hair was always combed back, thick and surprisingly full, and his weathered face bore a perpetual squint, as if always judging distances. He lived in a modest home behind the town's retired train station, where the siding peeled and the backyard opened to tall weeds and old memories. Jack arrived an hour later, greeted by the smell of tobacco and old leather. "Coffee?" Harold offered, already reaching for 2 mugs. "Sure." They sat in silence for a few minutes, letting the years settle. Then Jack spoke. "I'm looking for someone. Cameron Wells." Harold didn't blink. "Now there's a name I haven't heard in a while." "He's back," Jack said. "Anna saw him a couple weeks ago, then her dog disappeared. I found it tied to a tree, nearly frozen." Harold leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "You think he did it?" "I don't think. I know." Harold scratched his chin. "We had 2 complaints on Cameron back in the day. Domestic threats, noise, never enough to stick. Anna never pressed charges, always said he'd change." "Didn't." "No, he didn't." Jack took a sip. "You know where he is?" Harold nodded slowly. "Garage off Route 6. Used to be Riley's place. Cameron picks up odd repair work there. Keeps quiet, doesn't stick his head out." "Anyone else know?" "Only if they want trouble." Jack didn't say anything for a while. Then, "I need to see it." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Jack, you don't wear a badge anymore." "I'm not going to knock, just want to look." Harold stood. "Take my truck." "Less recognizable." Jack did. The garage on Route 6 was a 1-story cinder block building surrounded by weeds and rust. The sign out front had long since lost its letters. One roll-up door hung unevenly, and the windows were smudged with old grease. Jack didn't get out at first. He parked across the street behind a thicket of pine and watched. The building sat in stillness. When he finally stepped out, boots crunching gravel, he made no move toward the front. Instead, he circled around the back, keeping to the line of the fence. There, near the rear entrance, he saw it. A coil of rope, frayed and stiff with dirt, tucked beside the rusting frame of an old fridge. Nearby, a dented food bowl. Jack crouched, picked up the rope. The fibers were torn, like something had fought it. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. He snapped 2 photos with his phone, then drove back, mind racing. At home, Martha was sitting cross-legged on the rug, Scout resting beside her, tail twitching as he dreamed. She looked up as Jack entered, eyes full of quiet worry. "He okay?" Jack asked. "He ate a little," Martha said. But what?" She hesitated. "When the trash lid fell earlier, he dove into the closet." Jack sat down beside her. "Garage has rope, bowl, same type that was on him." Martha closed her eyes. "We need to tell someone," she said. "I will," Jack replied. "Harold still got reach." That night, as Scout curled beside Jack's feet and Martha dozed on the couch, Jack watched the fire and thought of names. Cameron, Anna, Timmy. But most of all, Scout. Not just a puppy anymore. Proof. The morning frost lingered longer than usual that day, clinging stubbornly to the bare branches like memory refuses to loosen its grip. Jack returned from Harold's house just after sunrise, the sky bruised with slow light. The cold bit at his knuckles as he pushed open the front door. Inside, the cabin was already warm. Martha had lit the fire, her silhouette framed against its flicker as she moved through the kitchen, her movements quiet, deliberate. Scout lay on his favorite spot near the hearth, head resting on his paw, eyes half open. His fur was clean now, the soft cream color shining where it had once been caked in dirt and fear. But his ears twitched at every distant thump, and he still flinched at the sound of doors opening too fast. Jack dropped his gloves on the counter and moved to kneel beside him. Scout lifted his head slowly, eyes finding Jack's. Jack stroked behind his ear, his voice soft. "We're getting closer, buddy." Martha stepped beside them, wrapping a shawl over her shoulders. "I've been thinking," she said, "about taking Scout to the community center today." Jack glanced up. "With the kids?" She nodded. "Logan's there today. He's the one the director said hasn't spoken in months." Jack hesitated. "Scout still isn't." "I know," Martha said gently, "but maybe they need each other." They drove out after breakfast, Martha with Scout wrapped in her coat on the passenger side. The Claremont Community Center was a 2-story red brick building near the town square, its windows fogged with breath and condensation. Inside, the warmth was human-made, children's laughter, soft music from the art room, the scent of crayons and old wood. The therapy wing was quieter. They were greeted by a woman named Elise Maher, the center's youth counselor. She was in her early 40s, tall and narrow-shouldered, with cropped blonde hair and a navy turtleneck that made her pale skin look almost translucent. Her voice was low, measured, as if every word had been practiced to avoid overwhelming. She welcomed them kindly, asked a few questions about Scout, then motioned them into the therapy room. It was a wide space with beanbags, plush mats, a shelf full of picture books, and walls painted with soft clouds and trees. At the far end, seated cross-legged on a green carpet, was Logan. He was small for 9, his body curled inward, arms wrapped tight around his legs. His brown hair fell in uneven strands around his face. He didn't look up when they entered. Elise knelt beside him. "Logan," she said softly, "we have a visitor today. His name is Scout." No response. Martha released Scout from her arms and placed him gently on the mat. He stood for a moment, nose twitching. Then, slowly, he walked toward the boy. Jack watched from the doorway, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Scout reached Logan, sat down without touching him, and simply waited. It took nearly 10 minutes before the boy shifted, another 5 before his hand moved, tentatively like it was floating underwater, and came to rest on Scout's back. Scout didn't move, didn't even blink. He only leaned slightly closer. Then Logan spoke. Just one word. "Truck." The room went still. Elise blinked, her eyes suddenly wide. Martha stepped forward, voice shaking. "What did you say, sweetheart?" The boy looked up, eyes locked on Scout. His mouth moved again. "Black truck." Martha knelt beside him. "Did you see a truck, Logan?" He nodded, then turned toward the drawing board and picked up a crayon. In jerky, focused lines, he began to sketch. A tall tree, a car with square wheels, a small shape beneath it, ears, a tail, a rope. Jack stepped closer. "That's where I found him," he murmured. Elise gently placed her hand on Logan's shoulder. "Can you tell us more, Logan?" The boy didn't speak again, but he kept drawing. One tree became 3. The vehicle's windows darkened. He pressed harder with the crayon. Jack saw it clearly. A black SUV. The same kind Anna described. The same model Harold said Cameron had been seen driving years before. By the time Logan finished, Scout had curled up in his lap, the boy's small fingers stroking his fur. Elise looked over at Jack and Martha, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to take this to the police." Jack's jaw was tight. "Not yet. Jack, I'll go to Harold first." On the way home, Scout slept soundly in Martha's arms for the first time since they brought him in. Jack kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on her knee. Neither of them spoke much until they reached the driveway. "I think Logan saved us all a step," Jack said. Martha looked down at Scout. Or maybe Scout saved him first. Jack stood outside the sheriff's office with his hands deep in his coat pockets, shoulders braced against the wind. Claremont's streets were hushed under a brittle sky, snow pushed into quiet piles along the curb. Across the lot, Harold Boone stepped out of a tan pickup, wearing the same brown canvas coat he'd worn since his first year on the force. The coat looked heavy with years, and so did Harold's eyes. He greeted Jack with a quiet nod. "Got your message?" Jack didn't waste time. Logan saw it happen, drew the whole thing. The black SUV, the tree, the rope, matches everything. Harold exhaled through his nose, steam curling. "The kid spoke?" "First word he's said in months," Jack said. Scout was the only one who could reach him. They went inside, where the air smelled of stale coffee and dry paperwork. Deputy Renee Callister, mid-30s, sharp-featured, tightly wound in the way only people under pressure are, met them at the counter. Her dark hair was tied in a no-nonsense bun, and her badge glinted against the navy of her uniform. She raised an eyebrow. "Boone, Porter, that's a pair I didn't expect to see together again." Jack nodded once. "We've got something." Renee listened as Jack laid out the story. Scout, the tree, Logan's drawing, the garage with the rope and bowl. Harold backed him, filling in gaps only a former officer could. When they finished, Renee frowned thoughtfully. "We've had a few complaints about that SUV in the past. Unmarked plates, erratic driving, always disappears before we get a plate read." Harold stepped closer. "You've still got those traffic cameras out by Deerfield Road?" "Still running," she said. "I'll check footage from that night." 2 hours later, the footage was pulled, a black SUV. Same make, same dents in the front bumper. Timestamp: 2 hours before sunrise, the same day Jack had found Scout. The vehicle turned off the main road near the tree line. It never came back on camera. "We got him," Renee said. She coordinated with the current sheriff to issue a quiet pickup request. No sirens, no confrontation, just quiet strategy. By nightfall, the SUV was located, parked behind the garage on Route 6. Inside, they found Cameron Wells. He didn't resist. But he didn't cooperate either. The man was in his early 40s, heavy-set with a short dark beard and bloodshot eyes. His denim jacket was stained with oil, and his boots tracked mud across the floor of the holding room. Jack watched through the window of the observation room, fists clenched at his sides. Harold entered the room alone, voice level. "We know about the dog, Cameron." Cameron scoffed, leaning back in the chair. "It was a stray. I didn't hurt it. You took him from Anna's place. We have a witness. We have drawings. We have camera footage." Cameron's jaw twitched. "You tied him to a tree, in a snowstorm. You meant to let him die." Cameron looked up slowly, his eyes dull. "I didn't touch her. That's what matters." Harold stayed silent, letting the weight of the words linger. Cameron spoke again, softer now. "She replaced me. With that thing. A stupid dog. That dog nearly died," Harold said. Cameron looked past him, toward the wall. "I just wanted her to feel what it's like to be left. Like I was. Like she left me." Harold stared. "You hurt something innocent. That doesn't make her feel your pain. It makes you the reason for someone else's." Cameron didn't answer. Later that night, after paperwork, after the charges were filed, animal cruelty, unlawful entry, evidence tampering, Jack walked out of the station into the bitter dark. Martha waited for him in the truck, Scout asleep in the back seat. Jack climbed in and sat still for a long moment. Martha glanced over. "You saw him?" He nodded. "It's him. He didn't deny it." She looked out the windshield. "Do you feel better?" "No," Jack said, "but I feel clearer." They drove home in silence, headlights carving soft lines through falling snow. Scout stirred once in his sleep, ears twitching, and let out a single bark. The first bark since the tree. Martha turned her head. "Did you hear that?" Jack smiled faintly. "I did." The snow had finally stopped. After days of relentless gray skies, the clouds parted above Claremont like a held breath released. And the sun, though pale and thin, cast gold across the frost-covered fields. Jack stood on the porch with the Scout beside him, the dog's tail sweeping lightly across the old wooden planks. His fur was thicker now, healthier, no longer matted with mud or stiff from cold. There was still a small scar where the rope had once pressed against his neck, but it was fading, like the worst of the story had already been told. Inside the house, Martha prepared tea while humming faintly, a tune Jack didn't recognize but found comforting anyway. A warm breeze slipped through the screen door as Scout sat and looked toward the long road leading down the hill, as if he knew someone was coming. She arrived just before noon. Anna stepped out of her old sedan slowly, shoulders drawn inward against the cold she no longer trusted to stay gone. She wore a dark green coat and jeans, her brown hair loose for the first time Jack could remember. There was no makeup on her face, no attempt to hide the way her eyes had been crying. She carried nothing but her hands clasped together in front of her, a gesture halfway between apology and prayer. Jack met her at the bottom step. "Thank you," she said softly, "for letting me come." He nodded and motioned toward the porch. "He's up there. He's been waiting." Anna took each step with care, her boots landing gently as if she might wake something sacred. When she reached the top, Scout stood, his head tilted, ears perked. He didn't move toward her, just watched. Anna knelt down, hands trembling as she reached out. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "You remember me?" Scout took one step, then another, and stopped just short of her touch. Anna's breath caught. Jack and Martha stood quietly behind them, neither speaking. Anna let her hand fall back to her side, smiling through tears. "He doesn't need to come to me," she said. "I just needed to see he was safe." Scout turned then, walked away from Anna, crossed the porch, curled up beside Jack's boots, and rested his chin on the old man's foot. That broke something open in her. Anna pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Martha came forward and gently touched her back. "I thought I'd lost everything," Anna said. "Timmy, then Scout. I didn't think I deserved anything good again." Martha's voice was soft. "We don't always get to choose what stays, but we do choose what we protect." Anna looked at Jack. "You've done more than protect him. You brought him back." Jack didn't answer right away. Then he said, "He brought us back too." Anna knelt once more, this time not to reach, but simply to be near. "He's not mine anymore," she whispered, "and that's okay." Martha gently guided her inside for tea. Scout followed but stayed close to Jack, their steps aligned in that quiet, wordless way dogs sometimes offer as trust. Later that afternoon, Anna said her goodbye at the door. She didn't linger, didn't ask for another visit, just smiled once, small, brave, and said, Tell him I'm grateful." Jack nodded. "We all are." When the sun began to dip behind the tree line, Jack retrieved a small piece of cedar wood he'd carved the night before. On it, he'd etched the words with careful hands, burned each letter with the same precision he once used to carve initials into Timmy's old treehouse. He hammered 2 nails into the side of the porch, beneath the window that caught the morning light, and hung the sign. It read, "Here, no life is forgotten, not even the smallest." Scout sat beside him, tail still, gaze calm. Jack looked down, reached to ruffle the fur behind his ear. "You're home, Scout," he said, "and you're staying." Scout let out a soft sound, something between a sigh and a yawn, and rested his head on Jack's knee. From the kitchen, Martha's voice drifted through the window. The kettle whistled, the fire crackled, and Jack smiled. Not every miracle comes with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it arrives in silence, shivering in the snow, wrapped in a flannel blanket, or curled up at the feet of someone who thought they'd lost everything. Scout was never just a puppy. He was a second chance wrapped in fur. He didn't just survive the cold, he melted it. From Jack's porch to Martha's heart, from Logan's silence to Anna's healing. And maybe that's how God works sometimes. Not by changing the world in one big act, but by placing one small soul in the right place, at the right time, to teach us that grace often looks like a quiet tail wag, a healing word, or a life no one believed still mattered. So, if you're watching this, wondering if your pain has a purpose, or if love can still come after loss, remember this: God hasn't forgotten you. Even the smallest life, even the most broken heart, is still seen, still loved, and still worth saving. Let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Comment Amen if you believe every creature deserves a second chance. Subscribe to our channel for more real stories of hope, rescue, and redemption. And may God bless you for staying with us to the end, because staying, just like Scout did, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do.